we highly encourage you to assign one of these tutorials. The reason we'd like you to assign one of these tutorials is that they're quick and easy introduction to the system. So each of them is about 15 to 20 minutes. It just gets your students used to the system. Like, that basic tutorial is qualitative. It's not very difficult. There are only 2 levels of the independent variable. So you basically have on and off. It's a really smooth introduction to Inq-ITS, and it gives you assessment data on how your students are doing with their science practices. And so you're giving your students something that they can do, and so they can get started before you really jump into something that's a bit more difficult. Because we all know as science teachers that science can be like learning a new language. And so we want to make it as smooth of a transition as possible. So these tutorials take about 15 to 20 minutes. You could do basic tutorial, and then if you feel comfortable, you could hop into something that's maybe like energy free fall. But if you felt like it was your students really struggled, then you could move on to basic tutorial 2, or if you needed to, basic tutorial 3. So in basic tutorial 1 and advanced, actually, which is the one I'm going to preview here today, when you do these, what you're going to get with your students is you're going to get information that your students will not have Rex the tutor turned on at all. So they're not going to be getting assistance from Rex. So when they're walking through this, what I did is I walked my kiddos through this. So if I were teaching students in a distance learning environment, I would do a video and record, or real time if you're doing synchronous, but I would record myself talking to my students about this introduction. So I would say, hey, this is the goal of that you're going to be investigating. This is your hypothesis. This is your independent variable, your dependent variable. Here we have your variables that are changing. Here we have your results in this table. And then when you're done, you're gonna make a claim. And you know what? Your hypothesis can be wrong and you can still get 100% in this system. And so when you are writing your claim, don't feel like you need to be saying that your hypothesis was correct. You know, if the data shows that your hypothesis was incorrect, then say that and you can still get 100%. And then you're going to write it up in a claim evidence reasoning format. And I highly recommend attaching the claim evidence reasoning rubric so that students know what to write there, because students just don't know what to write. So they have a quick introduction. You could walk them through that. And then as they hop into this lab, notice we have no Rex. Okay, so the benefit is that your students will just go through the lab and you're going to get an honest assessment of where they're at right now. The negative part of that is that if they're just clickers who don't read, they can just click through without creating a testable hypothesis right now. So I highly encourage my students, hey, we're going to read through this goal, determine how the height of the tower affects. So what are we changing here? Oh, we're changing our height of the tower. So we're going to say, if I increase the height of the tower, let me be really honest with you. I would make my students like handwrite this, write a big green arrow up. We are increasing the height of our tower. This is what a tower looks like. And then we're going to, what is it we're measuring here? We're measuring the distance traveled. And that's going to, let's just say I think it's going to decrease. What I put here doesn't impact my score, by the way. What impacts the score is whether it's aligned to this goal, whether they have a testable independent variable, and whether they have a testable dependent variable. Okay, so I come here and I start running my trials. And hopefully what our students do is they run these trials and they collect their data in a systematic way. Sometimes they get kind of random. We don't have Rex turned on. So they're going to do what they're going to do. Rex is not going to stop them. And when they're done, we get to see their data and we get to see their scores. They're going to move on from here. They're going to do that analyze and warranting section. And then they're going to finally get to the claim evidence reasoning section. So I don't want to take the time to run through all of that with you today. I just really wanted to encourage you, whichever one you do, whether you end up doing Flower or you end up doing Ramp, to really, whether it's live, if you're doing synchronous, or whether through a video or something, talking your students through that is really helpful because you really want them to read that goal. Okay, let's say that I wanted to assign, So Rex, the tutor, super, super helpful. He stops the students and they have to read his directions and they have to do good science, and he helps them to get better faster. And he is not available in tutorial 1 because we just want the kids to kind of fly through. He is in tutorial 2, making sure they have a testable hypothesis. And then he's in tutorial 3 throughout. So the kiddos can't quite do as much playing around, but by the third tutorial, they should be ready to get in, get down, get to business. Okay, so let's say I'm gonna assign this. So I can assign this to all my classes. If I'm going to publish this, I could put in my due dates and I could publish it in Google Classroom right now. Or I could just, if I'm not using Google Classroom, then I'll just do, it's very similar to what I'm about to do. So we're just, it's like a draft. So I'm not publishing to Google Classroom. Notice, not publishing. Okay, so I'm assigning this. So once it's assigned, if I did not previously publish that, if I was just at this point, then I have 2 different choices, right? If I'm using Google Classroom, I can update here, or I can go to Google Classroom, and in the classwork page, up at the top, it's in light gray because it's a draft. Or if I'm not using Google Classroom, I just grab this code right here. I copy that link, I go to whatever LMS I'm using, and I insert that link. And then what's gonna happen is when students have that link, I'm gonna show you, but in order to show you, I have to open an incognito window. Right? Or if I had Firefox or Safari on here, I could do that. But if you just put that code into your system, you're gonna get all kinds of messed up because our system is sensing that you're a teacher. So you can't just put in a student code and all of a sudden magically be a student because we've registered you as a teacher. So if you want to look at things as a student, you need to use an incognito window, which is what I've done up here. Or you need to use a different browser. Okay, so let's just say I'm this student, and then I would go and I'm gonna say, okay, I'm gonna make a new account, and it asks, is this your teacher? Yep. And then you wanna tell your students what you want them to do. If they're using Google or Clever, please tell them that, because if they're using Google or Clever, getting in the 2nd time, 3rd time, 4th time, 10th time is super easy. Even transferring from year to year. Let's say that you have them for 7th grade, another teacher has them for 8th grade or something along those lines. Getting in the next year is pretty darn simple if they have a Google or a Clever connected account. When they have usernames, they have to remember their usernames, or you have to look them up for them in your Students tab, and they have to remember their passwords, and that's hard. So Google and Clever, if they have them, are so much better. And then they're in, and they're going. But I want to show you, okay, so you sent them there, they go, they do their activity. Okay, so then if you want to see your students, click on students and you can see all of your students here. You can see whether they remember to click the Google button or the Clever button, and if you need to change their password, that's here. You can go see your reports, which I'm going to talk about in tomorrow's webinar. You can view your reports. And dark blue is proficient, light blue is approaching proficiency, and orange is like novice. They're struggling still. And hopefully you have more data than me because this is just me playing around, right? Student privacy, so I don't have very many students. But let's say you want to click in here and you want to look at a kiddo. It'd be nice if I finished an activity once in a while. But when you're doing webinars, it's hard to like sit and write full paragraphs. So if you're looking at Julian here, you could click and see this, all of the students' lab responses right there. You can see how Julian is doing, assuming I had 30 kids like I usually did, then they would all be appearing here rather than just the one student I pretended to be. So all of that data is right there. And then what else do I need to tell you? Reports, I'll talk a lot more about tomorrow. Here's those rubrics. That's what I was coming here for. Claim evidence and reasoning rubric. Super, super fantastic. So students know what to write. Ink Blotter is an alert system. Alerts pop up in real time if your students are struggling. Settings, if you want to connect, if you need to change any information or you want to connect to both Google and Clever, you can do that here. If you need to go in and manage your classroom sections, like let's say you only created 2 classes, but you really have 7, you could come here and you could do that and connect etc. Help and resources, we have lots of documents, lots of videos, etc. for you to check out. And okay, let's say your students completed their labs. I highly recommend having, so when they're done, they see their scores, like you see them in bars, but their students see their scores in stars. So 3 dark blue stars, or 2 light blue, or 1 orange. And then they have a copy of their work. So this is what I did, and I highly recommend doing that. Is the students can very easily print a PDF and attach that somewhere, whatever system you're using, they can attach their lab. And then what I did is when you were in reports, one of these documents is this hypothesis, data, and analysis rubric. That's for the first 3 sections, and then the claim, evidence, reasoning rubric. So what I did is I gave my students those rubrics, and in some cases I had them graph their data, like the warranting, that section, like the very last, like these are my good trials. I had my students grab those and graph them and attach that as well. So they're attaching their lab, they're attaching their graph, and then I gave them the chance to say, hey, if you were not happy with your score, here's some rubrics, and tell me what you would do what you would change in order to improve your score. And the truth is that I felt like my students had their best learning at that point. Like Inq-ITS helped my students to improve really, really quickly, and gave them practice doing things that you can't do otherwise, especially not at an independent level, because I always had 8 lab groups, and at least 4 kids in each lab group. And so having like an independent lab just wasn't happening. And so having the ability to have students doing an independent lab, and then also having those students doing something they can't do, like, you know, for seasons, I would always have like the flashlight and the globe, and I would like try and move your head and trying to explain seasons and lunar phases and stuff. And with an Inq-ITS lab, they can just mess around and they can do some inquiry, and it's so nice for students to be able to mess around with those things, and their learning is so much faster when they have those capabilities. But then I found that when they have the chance to reflect on their learning with the rubrics, that was really, really effective and impactful for helping students to improve those skills. So that's how I ask my students to turn in their work, and then they can mark it as done after they uploaded their PDF and uploaded their graph and wrote any information about what they would want to do to improve their scores if they weren't happy with their Inq-ITS scores. Anything else I want to tell you? Please attend my webinar tomorrow on reports, and on Thursday I'll be talking about Inq-Blotter. Oh, I want to tell you, reporting an issue. If for some reason you have a kiddo who's saying that they're struggling, what we're noticing is that students are downloading a lot of new games on their Chrome browsers. So please, if your students need to send in a help request, encourage them to open their console and get a picture of their entire screen. You don't have to tell your students that we're trying to figure out what stuff they've added to what games they've added to their Chrome browser, but the truth is that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out what they add, and what do we need to do to make sure that it's not impacting our system. Brand new ones, we always have to figure it out because they're coming up with new stuff all the time. Okay, I think that is it. I really, really, really appreciate you coming here today and talking with me, and please do not hesitate to